Right, The Small House at Allington, chapters 31 to 45. Before I start, I would like to warn you, I've had an operation for cataract recently, and I'm still adjusting between far vision and close vision. So if I do lose my thread or can't find my place in the notes, please be indulgent for just this week, this time. What I'm going to do is just a quick recap, 1 or 2 minutes of where we got to at the last meeting 2 weeks ago, and then a brief summary of developments in these chapters 31 to 45. Then point out a few things I found personally interesting and perhaps worthy of discussion, but of course you'll have your own points you'd like to discuss. And then I'm going to read you a few verses from a satirical poem called Roguery Taught by Confession, and the relevance of that will become clear as we go through the evening. Okay, so what's happened so far? 2 weeks ago, we left the inhabitants of Allington reeling from the wicked treachery of Crosby, Lily, Mrs. Dale, and the squire, devastated by the letters they've all received. React as one would expect. The squire is furious, Mrs. Dale is dismayed and worried about Lily, and Lily herself is in a state of shock. The squire has proposed a match between Bernard and Bell, with thoughts of abdicating squiredom and the great house in favor of the couple. Bernard is willing, but Bell refuses. And we get a hint of Dr. Crofts hovering in the background. Lady Alexandrina and Crosby are now engaged, and there is satisfaction, if not great joy, at Courcy Castle. But Crosby regrets his bargain. The Courcy connection loses its charm as he realizes what he's lost in Lily. And the anticipated promotion at work brings him no relief. He dreads the judgment of his friends and colleagues. And worst of all, he begins to dislike his in-laws and even his future wife. And in London at the Ropers, the drama continues. Amelia loves Johnny. Johnny professes to love her while continuing to pine for Lily. Cradell admires Mrs. Lupex and feels that Mr. Lupex doesn't deserve such a fine woman. Mrs. Lupex, of course, indulges in his jealous tantrums and drinks far too much. At Guestwick, Johnny Ames is regarded as a hero after he rescues the Earl from the bull, and his star is on the ascendant. Tongues are wagging about Lady Dumbello and Plantagenet Palliser. There's little concrete evidence, but the gossips, led by Lady Clandidlem, say that the lady seems more animated than usual in the presence of Plantagenet Palliser. Even Lord Dumbello seems concerned, and an elopement is predicted before spring. Right, things move on. At Allington, Lily succumbs to her grief, but after a week or so, resolves to accept the situation and be strong. She forgives Crosby and will not hear a word against him. She waits for his wedding day and the presumed hour and prays for their happiness. She vows to carry on as if it had never been, and starts on serious reading, Carlyle's French Revolution and Bunyan's Pilgrim's Progress. Were they on the list of Crosby's recommendations to improve her mind, we wonder? Then she catches Scarlatina from the maid, very conveniently as it turns out, and enter Dr. Crofts. The squire and Bernard talk about punishing Adolphus Crosby, but realizes that nothing can be done. Mrs. Dale formally acknowledges Crosby's letter. The squire then tries to enlist Mrs. Dale's support in persuading Bell to marry Bernard. Mrs. Dale refuses to interfere, and the squire, in his displeasure, implies that some obedience is due to him for all his generosity. This Mrs. Dale, strongly supported by the girls, decides to leave the small house for lodgings in Guestwick. The squire is most upset when he hears this and wonders why nobody loves him. He's annoyed that news of the quarrel is the talk of the village. However, still loves his nieces and eventually even comes to respect Mrs. Dale. The episode of Hopkins and the grapes in the garden of the small house attests to his sense of family duty and sense of propriety. And Crosby begins to pay for his sins. His worst fears are realized. Mr. Gaysby goes to work pro bono for his exalted in-laws. Crosby's money is all expended on furniture for his new home, a financial settlement on his future wife, and life insurance in case he dies. Moreover, he now owes money to Mr. Gaysby, which has to be repaid with interest. So his future income is also compromised. His dislike of the De Courcy family turns to hatred. Having to dine with the Gaysbys in St. John's Wood, oh my God, every Sunday is a bind. His losing his standing in London society, his friends and colleagues disapprove of his treatment of Lily. And the thrashing by Johnny Ames at Paddington makes him a laughingstock. Promotion at work brings him no joy. Then comes the marriage itself. Earl de Courcy refuses to pay for the wedding. The Countess manages a meager wedding breakfast. The honeymoon journey to Folkestone on the train, conducted in total silence. At the hotel, Lady Alexandrina takes a plate of bread and butter to bed before dinner. Crosby goes for a solitary walk on the pier, cold, dark, grey evening. Johnny Ames, in contrast, gains the friendship and patronage of Earl de Guest. He dines with him just before Christmas after the cattle fair in London at the Earl's Hotel. We're briefly introduced to Colonel Dale, Bernard's father, and his partiality for negus and bedtime arrowroot. Lord de Guest comes to know of Johnny's love for Lily, and he tries to help, invites him over to the manor over Christmas so that he can speak to her. He invites the Squire Dale, to dine on Boxing Day and proposes to him that they both contribute financially so that they can help the couple get married. The Squire is not averse to the idea, but is non-committal at first. Johnny enjoys his taste of high society and the Earl's vintage port, and acquits himself very creditably in his new environment. Then comes his encounter with Crosby. The hapless victim enters Johnny's railway compartment at Barchester Junction, and out of consideration for his fellow passengers, some of whom are ladies, John waits till the train gets to London. He then administers a chastisement at W.H. Smith's in Paddington Station, between the newspaper stand and the shilling novels. A truly delightful scene ensues. We are left sorry at the relative mildness of Crosby's injuries. Only one black eye. John Crumb does better with Felix Carberry in The Way We Live Now. At the Ropers, Amelia has hopes of marrying Johnny, and Johnny is getting into deep waters. The Lupex-Cradell drama continues. Mrs. Lupex is absent one afternoon, as is Cradell. Everyone assumes the worst. They must have run away. Lupex is distraught and drinks far too much. Then, all of a sudden, Cradell walks in by himself, all innocence, no knowledge of Mrs. L's whereabouts. Further speculation, where could she be? And then she walks in and says innocently that she's been on a trip to Hampton Court with some of her own friends. It's a very entertaining picture, the whole scene and the personalities in the Roper household. And Johnny seems to have matured in the last few months. He's acquired the respect of his family, friends and colleagues, and perhaps the Guestwick bull and chastisement of Crosby and his flirtation with Amelia might have contributed to some extent. Right, then we come to Belle and Dr. Crofts and Lily's role in all this. Lily's illness conveniently brings Dr. Crofts back to Allington, and long twilight evenings, tete-a-tete between the doctor and Belle. Belle's old feelings for Dr. Crofts are now partially revived, and she confides in him about the quarrel with the Squire and their reasons for moving to Guestwick. They get closer emotionally, and one evening, after expressing grave reservations about his poverty and hence his marital prospects, he proposes marriage to her. Completely taken aback, she blurts out no and then regrets it immediately. Lily manages to drag it all out of her later and quietly takes Dr. Crofts aside, persuades him to try again. He decides he will. So there's hope there yet. Let's see what happens. Finally, we come to Plantagenet Palliser and Lady Dumbello. The flirtation, which started in Courcy Castle amidst much gossip, continues over the autumn at the Marquis of Hartletop's seat in Shropshire. It's observed that the lady's habitually impassive countenance becomes perceptibly animated at Palliser's approach, much to Lord Dumbello's displeasure. Palliser, in his turn, is seen to enjoy her company, even though no intimate exchanges take place, just the odd commonplace remark. Over Christmas, at Gatherum Castle, the Duke of Omnium warns his nephew, run away with anyone you like, but do not offend the Hartletops. The threat is clear: loss of his £7,000 per annum allowance, loss of inheritance of all the land and properties, seat in Parliament, possibly even the dukedom, if the Duke decides to marry again and have his own children. The message is further reinforced by Fothergill, the Duke's man of affairs. Unfortunately, all this has the opposite of the intended effect. Palliser may have had a fleeting interest in Lady Dumbello before, but now it turns into something stronger. He vows to flirt energetically with her and actually succeeds in engaging her in conversation about the Corn Laws. What next? The Reform Act? He arranges to see her at her soirees in London. Who knows where all this will lead? The gossip is faithfully relayed by Lady Clandidlem to Lady de Courcy in her letters. It's in this context that Trollope makes a reference to the story of the priest who, by his question in the confessional, taught the ostler to grease the horse's teeth. "I never did yet," said the ostler, "but I'd have a try at it." In this case, the Duke had acted the part of the priest, and Mr. Palliser, before the night was over, had almost become as ready a pupil as the ostler. All right. And so the story about the ostler does sort of intrigued me a bit, and it sounded like either Restoration or Queen Anne sort of period humor. So rooted around for it in all the reference books I had and found it in a satirical poem attributed to John Walcott, also known as Peter Pindar, 18th century, sort of, I think he was born around mid-18th century and did a lot of his writing early 19th century as well. I'll share the poem with you, at least a few verses, a couple of verses there. But before that, like mention a few points I found interesting and which we may discuss amongst other things you would like to. First of all, Lily, is she a heroine or a female prig, as Trollope himself calls her in his autobiography? Even the author appears to lose patience with her saintly forgiveness of Crosbie, refusal to hear a word against him, and her continual manifestation of emotion and grief right up to his wedding day. There's a hint of selfishness as well, total disregard for the feelings of her mother and sister. Johnny Ames and his treatment of Amelia Roper. He promises marriage to her, writes a note to that effect even, when he has no intention of doing so. Has he any right to be so critical of Crosbie? Crosbie at least meant what he said when he proposed, even if he changed his mind later. And Johnny Ames and his progression to manhood. What are the contributing factors? And is it a change in him or in people's perception of him? Mrs. Lupex. I found her quite an intriguing character. It's not just a hysterical woman. She shows unexpected sense of humor, going away on this day trip without telling anyone, leaving everyone guessing where she is and what she's up to, and then walks in totally innocent and says, "Oh, I just went to Hampton Court Palace with a few friends." I don't think she's just a dumb neurotic woman. There's more to her. What do you think? And then Credell and Johnny amuse me a bit. Each of them warns the other, "Oh, you're getting into serious trouble." One with Mrs. Lupex, one with Amelia. Well, they don't seem to be able to see their own situation. See, neither of them seems to be able to see his own situation so objectively. The squire, he intrigues me as well. He's a very complex character. On the one hand, he's honest, generous, dependable, strong sense of family duty, but there's also a mean, stubborn streak in him. He expects obedience in return for his generosity and likes to have his own way with everyone. And he's also a reserved man, slow to react, adapt to change, and so appears rather cold and unresponsive. But I'd love to know what your opinion of him is. And another point found rather interesting is the status of Johnny Eames versus Crosby in the civil service. Again, I had a look around some of the parliamentary papers, etc. Johnny Eames is a clerk in the Income Tax Office, while Crosby becomes secretary of the General Committee at Whitehall. I'm not quite sure. And then the Board of Commissioners is mentioned as well. But I haven't been able to find any information on all this, on the departments and grades in the civil service in the 19th century. I just wondered if any of you knew and could throw some light on it. Finally, we come to Plantagenet Palliser, heir to the Duke of Omnium. He's serious, ambitious, interested in politics, no vices at all, and unmarried. Would his mild admiration for Lady Dumbello have gone much further if the Duke of Omnium and Fothergill had not actually interfered and perhaps suggested it to him? So that's where this poem comes in. As I said, it was written by John Walcott, aka Peter Pinder, and it's about an ostler who, as he's getting on in life, feels that he should put his life in order, get his soul and his conscience checked out. So he goes to a priest and goes to confession, and to him a free confession he makes, and boldly vowed he'd never sin again, etc., hoping the Holy Sire would lend his aid from his polluted soul to wipe the stain. And here the monk comes in, unfortunately, as it turns out. "Son," cried the monk, "although thy crimes are great, enough to damn thy wretched sinful soul, too much I fear there's one you do not state, and I, ere you're absolved, must hear the whole. Say, by Our Lady, did you ne'er beneath the manger keep some tallow in a horn? And did you never grease a horse's teeth to hinder him from surfeiting on corn?" "No, father, no," he cried. "I'm not involved in such a crime. Indeed, I've named the whole." So then the priest his load of sin absolved, and home the ostler steered with whitewashed soul. Just 6 months after this, the ostler came, and again before the friar to confess, acknowledging with penitential shame his greasing horse's teeth with great success. "Oh, wicked son," the Holy Father cried, "did you not tell me when I saw you last that you had never in your life applied grease to a horse's teeth to make him fast?" "Yes, holy sir, I did, and then spoke true," replied the man of straw with utterance quick. "For although it may seem strange, rather strange to you, I never then had heard of such a trick." So beware of warning people not to do something bad. You may be giving them ideas. Thank you.